On this vote, the yeas are 52, the nays are 48. The confirmation is confirmed.
That was the Senate confirming Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services. Once again, Senator Mitch McConnell was the only Republican to defect from his party and vote against confirmation. McConnell, a childhood polio survivor, said he took issue with Kennedy's past remarks questioning the efficacy of vaccines. It was a subject that came up frequently during Kennedy's hearings, but ultimately did not stop him from being confirmed as one of the country's top public health officials. CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion joins me now. Nikole, Kennedy was seen as one of the more controversial picks. Remind us how we got here and what his job now will be.
Yeah, well, we got here after weeks of RFK Jr. making the rounds here on Capitol Hill. And while he did face quite a bit of skepticism and even questions about whether he would have some bipartisan support, ultimately we saw this vote along party lines. I mean, look, he endured 2 days of confirmation hearings that got very tense at times, particularly on his views over, as you mentioned, vaccines and vaccine efficacy, whether or not there was a link between vaccines and autism. So that being said, ultimately he was able to convince some senators, most notably Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, a physician and also a member of both the Finance Committee and the Senate Health Committee, that he could come to a resolution with Kennedy with respect to his views, because they did have a very pointed exchange with, at one point, Cassidy asking RFK Jr., look, all you have to do is just say that these vaccines are safe. But obviously, after having some conversations with him and the vice president, he was able to get to a yes vote on Kennedy, as did other senators, and that's how ultimately he sailed through, although former leader Mitch McConnell did not support RFK Jr. in his final confirmation vote.
Department of Education Secretary nominee Linda McMahon had her first confirmation hearing Thursday. You were inside. What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, this was an interesting hearing from the standpoint that it was at times contentious, but also I would say that Linda McMahon was very measured in her statements. Of course, her appearance comes as there are a lot of questions swirling right now about the fate of the Department of Education and whether or not it will be closed. We do know that the president is working on a potential executive order to dismantle the agency, but Linda McMahon made clear in her testimony that ultimately, kind of whatever the fate of the department may be, that the goal of the administration is not to defund education, but to make the agency more efficient, although she did talk about potentially outboarding some functions of the department to other federal agencies. That being said, I had a chance to catch up with former Education Secretary Arne Duncan, who served under former President Obama. Take a listen to our discussion. As a former secretary, did you ever think we would get to this point about talking about the potential abolishment of the Department of Education?
Yeah, well, I tried to give a brief history lesson earlier that for 70 years, Republican presidents have fought to increase the role of education and seen it in our nation's interest. It's our national interest. This is not about R versus D. Trump is an absolute anomaly. I am very, very scared for education in our country, and I am equally, if not more, concerned for our nation's democracy. So the stakes here could not be higher.
So he called all of the actions that the Trump administration has taken to date, because we know the president has already issued some education-related executive orders, as well as a number of directives. But that being said, he feels at this point in time that this is an all-out assault on public education. And as a former secretary, but also as a former school superintendent, talked about some of those real-world impacts in terms of impacting, for instance, low-income students, students with disabilities, other students who may have special needs, and even on the higher education level, impacting things like Pell Grants, although McMahon did express support for maintaining the Pell Grant program. So that being said, still a lot of questions on the parts of not only the former secretary, but certainly many critics who wonder if the Department of Education can and will survive.
Nikole Killion, thank you.